Israel has made its case clear when it comes to Palestinian statehood, but is also actively seeking normalization with all its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. Here to speak with us about the challenges ahead on both fronts is Aria Lightstone, the former senior advisor to the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Aria, thank you for joining us. Just to start, what can you tell us about the demands that Saudi Arabia is putting on Israel? Is Palestinian statehood really a non-negotiable demand from Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think let's take one step further back, if that's okay. When negotiations happen publicly, they're destined to fail. The Middle East has a lot of people who are motivated to make sure that peace does not happen. And the more public thoughts that are out there and public negotiations that happen, the easier it is for those people who wish peace to not succeed to torpedo those negotiations is that. So I have not been in the room with the current Saudi administration, with the current U.S. administration. But I would tell you this, I'm yet to see a successful foreign policy initiative by this administration. I'd be shocked if this became their first one.
Now, what is your take on this statehood recognition by Ireland, Spain, and Norway? Just how damaging is this move, politically speaking?
Well, I challenge people to name the capitals of Norway, Ireland, and Spain. They are as relevant as people allow them to be relevant. It is counterproductive. It is virtue signaling is what it is. It doesn't help the Palestinian people. It certainly doesn't help Israel. And it should be condemned by people who want to be forthright about condemnation the same way the ICC and the ICJ should be condemned. The challenge is we have a lot of people who are doing performative actions without any actual substance, and it's taking everything backwards.
Now, do you believe that this push for Palestinian statehood could actually be pushing away a permanent solution, that it's rewarding terror, as Netanyahu has mentioned explicitly?
Well, it's doing a bunch of different things. It's turning Hamas into heroes. I'm not positive who wants to turn Hamas into heroes unless you're on an Ivy League campus in the United States of America. I'm not positive why it brings Hamas to the negotiating table, because they're getting everything by staying away from the negotiating table. And frankly, if anybody actually cared about the Palestinians, of which I'm highly skeptical that people outside of the state of Israel actually care about the Palestinians, they would be rooting for the complete and total elimination of Hamas and then a discussion about what can happen the day afterwards. But to go ahead and to declare a Palestinian state, who's running it, what are the borders, what are the rules that are there, and until people actually figure out any of those things, all it is a waste of language. And the problem is in international diplomacy, language matters. So who's going to take any of these people seriously on a go-forward basis?
Now, you've mentioned that you don't believe the negotiations with Saudi would be successful at this point, at least under the Biden administration. Is there a scenario in which you believe this normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia could actually come to fruition, and in what circumstance?
Oh, the Saudis and Israelis will make peace at some point in time. To a great degree, it's will the United States of America get out of the way. You have an issue. Saudi Arabia is, I think, one of the most impressive kingdoms on this planet. And I would argue that the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness, Mohammed bin Salman, is one of the most consequential human beings alive on the planet. That does not make him perfect, but it makes it the endeavor that he has to change the way the kingdom looks from before he got there to what he'd like it to look like in the future is one of the most consequential activities that's happening today on planet Earth. At the same time, the state of Israel is a living miracle of what it looked like before 1948 and what it looks like today. Will these two countries be better off together? They absolutely will be. Will these two countries have a relationship that's based upon either of their relationships with the Palestinians and have a chance of success? Absolutely not. So what are we trying to accomplish here? Peace, or we're trying to accomplish aggravation?
Great question. Well, Aria Lightstone, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And joining us now is former mayor, attorney, and host of the Standpoint podcast, Gabriel Groisman. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Gabriel, the ICJ came out with this decision on Friday. It seems the wording of the ICJ's order regarding the Rafah operation is somewhat ambiguous. From your understanding, what does it mean exactly?
Look, the message is more important than what the wording is. If you look at actually the ruling, you can listen to it online. I listened to it this morning. They're saying that the operation should halt so there can be a further investigation of potential genocide, which we all know is absolute nonsense. The message is clear, and Hamas got that message. As this morning, as I'm sure you've reported, there's been a barrage of rockets from Hamas from Gaza to civilians in Israel, because what the ICJ did by making this ruling is give a green light to Hamas to continue attacking civilians, to continue its unbelievably unprecedented attack on civilian life in Israel with the protection of the world community. That's what the ICJ's ruling meant. Hamas, don't worry, we've got your back. That's the message of the United Nations this weekend.
Now, what does this decision mean for Israel? Is it binding?
So technically it's binding, but they don't have really any enforcement mechanism. So really what it is just another layer of pressure that the international community is putting on Israel. Israel is becoming more isolated. That is true. It's becoming a more divisive issue around the world. We have the International Criminal Court also, as I'm sure you've reported, seeking warrants potentially against Netanyahu and Gallant. These are just layers upon layers of international pressure that are being laid upon Israel to have them stop their war against Hamas, to stop their attempt to save the hostages and to fight back against this terror organization.
What further actions can the ICJ take if its orders are not fully adhered to?
I mean, that's a good question. They don't have any enforcement mechanism, so they can continue to condemn Israel. They can continue to create pressure, but they can't really do much. The ICJ, much like the ICC, is a kangaroo court. The ICC does have a mechanism with warrants and arrests that's a little bit more dangerous for those individual leaders that they're seeking warrants against. But the ICJ, it's just, we're going to hear more and more statements and condemnations and resolutions. But if you just peel the onion a little bit and see who's sitting in the ICJ, who's sitting in the United Nations Security Council, the bodies that are making these decisions, you're seeing that although these entities may have begun with the best of intentions, they've been taken over by the worst actors in the world.
Now, clearly, as we see and as is being reported, Israel has safely evacuated about 1 million Palestinians out of Rafah, and the U.S. now seems on board as opposed to previous concerns that they've voiced in the past. Can we expect the U.S. to veto the ICJ decision in the Security Council? Do you assess that it will?
That's a great question. It's a new day in the United States where we were not sure that the United States government will support Israel, but that's just the reality. The U.S. is supporting Israel's attack on Rafah only if it's a limited nature. So the all reports are there's some sort of agreement on a limited engagement in Rafah as opposed to a full-scale invasion. But you can't be half pregnant and you can't go to war halfway, which is what the United States wants Israel to do. Will the United States veto the resolution that will be coming by the UN Security Council? I hope so, but I don't take it to the bank.
Now let's talk about the global ramifications. Even if this decision is not binding legally, how does it impact Israel's image worldwide, which we know is not so great and not in a great state as it is?
Yeah, Israel's image worldwide has been tarnished. That's just a reality that we in the Jewish community around the world and the pro-Israel community around the world have to wrestle with. It's just a reality. The ICJ opinion will, in the United States, for example, won't have big ramifications here in the sense that people don't look at the United Nations with the same eyes that people around the world do. But in Europe and South America and Asia, really on the rest of the planet, the words of the United Nations and the ICJ really do have a lot of meaning. I think we're going to see a continued pressure from economic pressure, diplomatic pressure from countries around the world, countries that we've looked at as allies. Case in point was Germany, who throughout this war has been pretty good for Israel, which has been a breath of fresh air given the history of Germany. But just this week, they said on the ICJ matter that if there's an arrest warrant, they're going to enforce the arrest warrant. And just so the viewers know, there's never been an arrest warrant issued by the ICC against a sitting head of state. But this is the first one, and why not against the Jewish state?
Gabriel Grossman, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Israel, the United States, and Qatar have agreed to renew mediated talks on a truce for a hostage deal with Hamas. Over the weekend, the IDF brought back to Israel the bodies of 3 hostages murdered on October 7th, with their bodies held in Gaza. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The fresh hostage for truce negotiations will reportedly be mediated by Egypt and Qatar on the basis of a new outline negotiated in Paris by CIA Director William Burns, Mossad Chief David Barnea, and Qatari Prime Minister Al Thani. There has been no progress in talks since last month when Hamas failed to agree to the deal accepted by Israel. The War Cabinet expanded the mandate of the team negotiating a deal after reports that the Security Cabinet gave the team more room to maneuver. According to reports, Prime Minister Netanyahu was swayed by the broad support for the move and the recent release of footage showing the kidnapping of female IDF soldiers on October 7th. Meanwhile, after a complicated retrieval operation based on intelligence, the IDF has recovered the bodies of 3 captives murdered during the October 7th massacre and their bodies abducted to Gaza by Hamas terrorists.
It is with a heavy heart that I share that last night, Israeli special forces in Gaza rescued the bodies of our hostages, Hanania Vlonka, Michelle Nissenbaum, Orion Hernandez. Their bodies were rescued during a special operation based on precise intelligence in the area of Gaza.
The bodies of Hanania Blonka and Michal Nissenbaum were laid to rest today in Israel.
There are men, women, children, and babies being held by Hamas in living hell across our border in Gaza. We will not stop fighting for their freedom. Every decent country in the world would do the same.
The army believes that 128 hostages and bodies of hostages are still being held in Gaza.
Well, after Israel announces willingness to return to hostage negotiations, the families of hostages still in Gaza are waiting with bated breath to see their loved ones come home. One of those families is that of Doron Steinbrecher, the 30-year-old Israeli nurse who was kidnapped and is still being held hostage by Hamas. Doron's mother, Simona, joins us now to discuss the situation. Simona, first of all, thank you so much for joining us at this very difficult time. Can you share with us the latest information about Doron's status in Gaza? What do you know?
I don't know a lot. From the people who came from Gaza, no one saw her. And in a day of 107 day, Hamas sent us a movie. And that movie, you can see it. Here is Doron in the movie that Hamas sent to us. And this is Doron in the day they take her. You can see the difference,
of course,
between 2 pictures, 2 photos to see how she's looking. Here, how skin, how ill she looking. She need to take medicine every day, and they don't give her properly. So we are very afraid about what happened with her in Gaza.
And you haven't heard any updates since that video, correct?
Nothing.
Wow. What are your thoughts on the hostage negotiations? Are you and the other families feeling hopeful about these round of talks?
I saw yesterday with everyone the movie. What the Hamas do to the young people from they cut yesterday. Yeah, this movie. And I don't know if people heard, but one of the things that the Hamas said, one to each other, this is the girl that can be pregnant. And we are really, really afraid about our women there, what happened with them. And we cry not only from now, we cry from the beginning that they need to take them very quickly outside before they can be pregnant there. And now take a teacher for and that. And now we heard the Hamas say the same words that we are afraid about what happened there.
Do you think that after the release of this horrible video that the government is taking this issue more seriously? Has this inspired them to take action and to find a deal?
I really hope, because they don't have time, not only there, all the hostages don't have time. The time it's going out for them, they are 230 days there. It's a lot. It's more than 7 months. I don't know how people can wake up, go to sleep, and don't take them out. It must to do not now, many months ago.
Now, we've seen that in the international community, there's a lot of focus on Gaza, on the Palestinians, and less on the release of hostages like Doron. What would you like the international community to know and to hear on behalf of Doron?
I think that the people who saw the news saw the things that Hamas sent them and tell them. But this is not the real story about what happened there. First of all, they all the time say that there isn't food there. The reason food there is because the Hamas who killed the Palestinian people who came to take the picture, to take the food. Sorry, I saw the picture who came to take the food, they killed them and don't let them to take the food. So the reason that there is no food there, it's not because Israel don't let it. It's because the Hamas who killed them.
Absolutely.
And the Hamas killed their one people. So I think the world don't know really what happened. They saw only the picture and the story that the Hamas send them to see, but it's not the real picture. And we need all the time to show really what happened there for them people in Gaza too, because they are like hostages. They're there from Hamas people. So we need to do all for us and for them and for all the hostages in there to make a deal and take it out, and that they can go out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Simona. Wishing you all the best, and we will continue to hope and pray for the release of Doron along with all of the hostages. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The War Cabinet has voted unanimously to approve new guidelines for the Israeli negotiating team to renew talks for the return of hostages. Egyptian mediators are reportedly testing the waters to try to restart the stalled indirect talks between Israel and Hamas. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Reports from the War Cabinet do not give away details except to say that Israeli negotiators have been given the green light to continue talks for the return of the 128 hostages held captive in Gaza since October 7th. The War Cabinet decision comes amid reports in the Egyptian media that Egyptian mediators are testing the waters to see if they can restart indirect talks between Israel and Hamas on reaching a hostage for truce deal. An Egyptian source was quoted saying that contacts are being made with all active partners. This despite a lack of progress in recent weeks and friction between Israel and Egypt over the ongoing Rafah operation. It's also after Egypt had reportedly altered the previous hostage deal after Israel had already signed it. The meeting of the War Cabinet was held after the families of hostages released harrowing footage showing the abduction of 5 female soldiers from the Nahal Oz base by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. They say that their goal in releasing the video was to wake up the leadership to work more urgently to secure the hostages' release.
My daughter and the other 6 girls were the only ones that were survived in this attack, and this film was taken after they saw a lot of her friends that was murdered there, and they were lying there in front of them.
The video struck a responsive chord with the Israeli public and served as a reminder that the hostages have been held for 230 days.
So I'm saying that really every minute that my daughter could avoid this situation and terrified of being raped or sexually abused, or I just want everyone do whatever they can to bring her home.
Following the announcement of the International Criminal Court that they're seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, the international community is responding harshly to the ICC over their double standards. Let's take a closer look. Prime Minister Netanyahu has responded to the ICC's announcement that they are requesting a warrant for his arrest by calling the ICC a kangaroo court. The ICC's decision has been slammed globally, in part due to their decision to equate Israeli leaders with Hamas terrorists, whom they also seek to obtain arrest warrants for.
This guy is out to demonize Israel. He's doing a hit job. He's creating a false symmetry between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the terrorist chieftains. That's like saying after 9/11, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for bin Laden. Or after in World War II, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR, but also for Hitler.
Netanyahu also condemned the politicization of the ICC, claiming ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan is turning the court into a pariah institution. World leaders have also harshly condemned the ICC's move, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken strongly condemning the ICC and UK Foreign Minister David Cameron calling it just plain wrong.
As we've said from the outset, because Israel is not a signatory to the Rome Statute and because Palestine is not yet recognized as a state, we don't think that the court has jurisdiction in this area. But I would go beyond that and say, frankly, I think this is mistaken in terms of position, in terms of timing, in terms of effect. To draw moral equivalence between the Hamas leadership and the democratically elected leader of Israel, I think is just plain wrong.
Former Trump advisor Robert O'Brien told Reuters the move by the ICC was irrational and urged the U.S. to issue sanctions on the ICC over the targeting of Israel. The Biden administration has, in fact, signaled they are willing to work with U.S. Congress on sanctions of the ICC in response. And President Biden himself responded to the ICC arrest warrants against Israeli officials, calling the move outrageous. Day 230 of the war in Gaza, and the IDF is still advancing in Rafah and along the Philadelphia route after the most intense night of bombing since the start of the Rafah offensive earlier this month. The IDF announced the deaths of 3 soldiers in fighting in northern Gaza, and ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has more.
Israeli tanks advanced to the edge of a district in the heart of Rafah, in the Strip south, following the most intense night of bombardment since the start of the Rafah offensive earlier this month. At the same time, more than half of the strategic 14-kilometer-long Philadelphia route along the Egyptian border is now under IDF control. Soldiers located and destroyed multi-barrel rocket launchers located along the Philadelphia corridor close to the border. The Army has said that it located dozens of tunnel shafts and a number of significant underground routes in the eastern Rafah area that are currently being prepared to be demolished. The Army has not detailed how many of the tunnels cross into Egypt. In the past, Hamas used such tunnels to smuggle in weapons and supplies. Meanwhile, the IDF announced the deaths of 3 soldiers killed during clashes with Hamas gunmen in northern Gaza. The deaths came as the Netzach Yehuda Battalion and other IDF forces conducted pinpoint raids in northern Gaza's Beit Hanun, where terrorists emerged. The IDF has carried out several operations in Beit Hanun since it was first captured in the initial ground offensive last year. Troops are continuing to work to kill remaining gunmen and locate tunnels and other infrastructure used by the terror groups. The latest deaths brought the toll of slain troops in the IDF's ground offensive against Hamas and during operations along the Gaza border to 286.